Do I need an intercooler? I see this question pop up online, and the answer really is it depends. If you're asking that question, I think the first thing you need to understand is what is the biggest benefit of installing a upgraded intercooler on your car? It's to keep the intake air temperatures down, which helps with performance and power. And anybody who's asking that question should really answer some questions about what they plan to do with the car, what the climate is like where they live. Then we can answer that question. Will it make an improvement on performance? Yes. How often would you need that? It depends on what you're doing. If you're planning on just ripping up and down the street, back and forth, around the track, autocross, that sort of thing, you definitely need an intercooler. If you're just daily driving and you enjoy an occasional launch or whatever, maybe you don't need an intercooler. But in this case, I do need an intercooler. I kind of want an intercooler. I have not ran an intercooler for a long time. I was even stage 2 at one point, but I really wasn't doing what I'm doing now, where I'm going to the track pretty regularly. I'm planning on doing some autocross, so I'm going to need those cooler intake air temperatures. So that's what we're doing today, and we're installing an intercooler from Integrated Engineering on my Golf R. All right, let's dive into this box from Integrated Engineering. I have kind of pre-opened it, but I actually haven't taken the intercooler out yet. Oh, this thing's heavy. Man, seems to be in pretty good shape. It looks really, really good. I would guess, oh man, I would guess this thing probably weighs 25 pounds. So just here in the bottom, we've got another koozie, and then some bolts, some other miscellaneous hardware bits in there.
One of the major design differences that Integrated Engineering points out in their design is their FDS system, where the end tanks have these guide vanes for air to be distributed evenly across the intercooler. Here you can see with those, it forces air up into the top of the intercooler.
All right, before we get started on this install, I just want to talk a little bit about what I already have done to the car at this point. So I've got Integrated Engineering's intake. I've got the Autotech high pressure fuel pump internal upgrade. I have Integrated Engineering's TrueFlex harness in here, and that's it. So right now I'm running stage 1 TrueFlex. I have about E75 in it right now, and ethanol is kind of hard for me to get in Western Washington, so it's not something that I'm planning on running regularly. So yeah, it's fun to play with though. So the plan for this is install the intercooler, do some drag runs actually tomorrow, so there'll be some quarter-mile times coming shortly after this, and then install the downpipe, jump to stage 2, and play around with the TrueFlex tune there. And one thing I want to note before getting into this is that the procedure that I'm going to do is not by removing the radiator. I'm going to take off the bumper cover, I'm going to take off the crash bar, and I'm going to swing out the AC condenser. That way the radiator stays in place. I don't have to worry about draining coolant and making a big mess. All right, first step is going to be getting the car up, whether you have a lift or jack stands, getting those front wheels off so you can access some screws that are in the inside of the fender liners. You're going to take wheels off and then start taking off stuff underneath. All right, so taking a look underneath, I have the all-track belly pan. If you just have the stock splash guard, you're going to have 4 T25 screws on this side, and I believe 3 over on this side. With the all-track belly pan, I've got 2 13mm bolts here, 2 more up over here, and I believe it's 2 more in the back. So just take all the bolts off of that, splash guard off. And then there's also going to be right along this track here, there's 1, 2, and 3 T25 screws that are connected to the bottom of the radiator support bracket. So you're gonna have to take those off as well. And while you're under here, you might as well go ahead and remove on both sides. There are 2 T25 screws on the bottom side that attach the fender liner to the bumper. And then over on the passenger side, you have the same thing. With everything out from underneath, now we're going to detach this lower wheel liner here. And there's gonna be 1, 2, 3, 4 that allow you to then drop that piece. And then if you look up inside the fender liner here, the upper, there's going to be 1 here that detaches that allows you to peel that back. But you're also going to remove this one here, which is one of the pieces that holds on the bumper. So there's going to be a total of 6 T25s within the wheel well liner here that you're going to remove. All right, now on the MK7 Golf R, we have super fantastic headlight washers. There's a connection that goes to the bumper, runs underneath the car with 2 clips. You're gonna rotate this out, and then there's gonna be a blue piece like this on each side that you're going to depress and then slide it off. But if you have a full washer reservoir like I do, when you take that off, and it's gonna go shooting out the back like a stream. So I'm speaking from experience. If you have something that you can plug it with or just let it drain and capture it, I'm gonna try and do my best here, but there we go, I've got it. I'm gonna try and put this in there. Oh, it's not working. Oh, it's kind of working. Oh, crap. Nope, it's not gonna hold. Well, and there's gonna be a little bit of residual in your hose. Now that we've got the fluid drain down below, we're gonna attack the grill here. There's 2 T25s on either side of the grill. You're going to take those off. On the Mark 7 Golf R grill, there's an area that's kind of tucked right along in under here, and you can kind of see how I'm pulling out a little bit, getting my hands up in there. And you're gonna kind of wanna work it out from underneath this other trim piece here. There's a couple of clips, it'll pop out, and then on the Mark 7 Golf R grill, it actually lifts up. You just lift straight up. On the Mark 7.5, there's tabs that go inward where you actually have to slide it outward. So very different. Make note of that if you have a Mark 7 versus a Mark 7.5. So after getting the grill off, there's some stuff to take off under here. I've seen people take off these Torx screws here and then unclip the bumper from this. But you're gonna be taking off this whole piece anyway that is held on by 3 T30 bolts. So you can just take those out and that whole piece will become disconnected from the front of the car. So next, on both sides of the car, since you have everything else disconnected, there's these clips right underneath the bumper here, and you're just gonna lightly pull this out, and you'll pull out until it pops. And you'll just, it'll be a little scary, but it'll finally pop off there. You'll want to do that on both sides, and then at that point you'll be able to pull the bumper off, but you'll want to disconnect the wire harness. So you got to be really careful, because once you get both of those sides off, the bumper will just basically slide forward and off of the clip here. So what you can do is pause for a moment and disconnect the electrical connector on the side, which I'll show you. So I've got the Aerofab front splitter on the underside of my bumper, so I'm not worried about scraping all the paint. So that's why I've got it sitting on the ground. But this is a great opportunity to go through and clean up all the little bits. So then we're going to, on both sides, we're going to remove these 3 T30 bolts on this bracket here. I believe the rear bolt is quite a bit longer. So take note. To disconnect this hood release from this bracket here, you're going to have to pinch these little bits on the back side and push them out, and being very gentle since it's plastic. Mine's like relatively new, so it's pretty flexible, but I'm still afraid that I'm gonna break it. There we go, I've pried it enough to where I got one side off. There we go. So now you just disconnect the ball here, and that goes and slides out. All right, with these brackets removed, there's a T30 that is down in here in the front, and there's a T30 that is down here in the back. There's also a T30 on the side of each right here that you're gonna have to take out. Once you have that out on the side, you're able to slide them forward And this is why you don't have to totally remove the one on the back, because there's just an opening there. So you don't have to take that bolt all the way out. All right, on this electrical connector here, you push down and you're able to lift the tab. So I was trying to get my screwdriver underneath because on this back side it looked like maybe it was something that you lifted. So you actually press on it and then you're able to wiggle it off. Pulling the headlight out a little bit does help. The next bit that I'm going to do is take out my intake. I'm going to try and take it out all as one piece so I don't have to take out all the little tiny screws for the carbon lid. And yeah, we'll get that part off and we'll move on to the next step. Everything looks okay. The next bit that I'm going to remove are these little air guards here. There's 3 clips. There's one here at the top and then 2 kind of down here in the lower section. And I'll show you exactly how these things come out. You're able to just kind of maneuver this through here and remove it. You're going to do the same thing with the other one on the other side. Nope. And you want to be careful on this one. There's a little part where the ambient air temperature sensor is running through the rubber on this. So with this ambient air temperature sensor, you can press it outward, and when you're pressing it out, you just pull down really lightly and it will slide off. All right, we're also going to disconnect the horns on both sides. There's a tab on top here that I'm pushing back, and as I'm pushing back, I'm just kind of lightly wiggling and sliding. You might get kind of a suction sound. There we go. All right, and then since I have a 2017, the MK7 Golf R, my adaptive cruise control sensor is this big honking thing from the lower grille. I'm going to disconnect this sensor. I'm going to squeeze the sides here and just wiggle it down. I'm going to leave the sensor in place mounted when I pull off the beam. There we go. On the driver's side, we've got 2 electrical connectors. We've got the hood latch electrical connector and a crash sensor. Whew, it's a little crusty. All right, and then you want to be super duper careful on this crash sensor. There's a little red locking tab that you want to get a pick or something to pull it down. You can use your fingernail. There we go. It pulls down just a tiny little bit, and then you're able to depress it and slide that off. Over here on the driver's side, the red locking tab is facing the opposite direction, so depress that and slide it off. All right, I'm at a point where the crash beam needs to come off. Since I'm doing this solo and I only have 2 hands, plus I'm trying to hold the camera, here's what I'm gonna do. I have these bolts from Integrated Engineering. What I'm gonna do is remove the upper outer on each side and put these bolts in there as something to help hold. I think in Integrated Engineering's instructions, they do the whole radiator disconnect. They have you put these bolts in the lower section and it tilts the crash beam forward into service position. I'm going to be pulling the crash beam all the way off, but I'm going to first remove this, put this bolt in on both sides, and then remove the other 3 so that I can easily slide this off. And what's nice is that these bolts have a shank on them, so you're not sliding on threads. So let's try that. These stock bolts here are a 16 millimeter. Probably just going to do this by hand. That's probably on there even way too far, but so that's what I'm going to do on both sides. And I'm going to work smarter, not harder. On both driver and passenger side, there are T30 bolts that are holding the whole radiator frame in place. And so if you notice, this came pretty loose. So I have my garbage can sitting underneath here. It is just the right size to provide a little bit of support for when we loosen these up and totally take off the T30s here. So I was a little confused as to why my crash beam wasn't coming off, and I forgot that I have additional supports for my all-track skid plate. So I've got to take those off since it's bolted through the end of the frame rail here. Some more T30s that you'll need to remove are these 2 up here. This is all connected to the frame or to the crash beam. There we go. So now you can see the whole crash beam has tilted forward. I've got my bolts on the side, whether you can see them or not. So you can see where everything kind of tilted forward and it's holding in place because I have those bolts there. That is gonna help me as a one-man show. I wish I didn't put this bolt in so far. Oops, there goes my bezel. Bezel! Alright, I am taking the whole crash beam off with the horns. I'm gonna set it to the side. Once you get into this and you're doing it, it all makes sense how it goes together. But once you get rid of those T30s that are on the side here, that is what is really supporting this entire radiator core frame. So I've got my garbage cans supporting the AC condenser, the intercooler, and the radiator behind it. Otherwise, it'd be stressing and probably trying to flop down on the ground. So I'm at a step now where I need to separate the tabs here from the radiator core support. Could try and pull the AC condenser off, but I don't want it flopping around out front while I'm trying to disconnect these. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get my, this is my pry tool. I'm just gonna put my handle back up in here. I'm gonna apply a little bit of pressure while I depress these tabs with the screwdriver. These are a lot stiffer than I imagined. Ugh, damn, no wonder people break these things. All right, I see what's going on here. Got the top a little bit. Now time to get the bottom a little bit. Holy crap. Ah, there we go. Push with your thumbs. Whew, that was some hard work. I'm gonna do this other side off camera. One other bit, because of the adaptive cruise control sensor that's up front, that you'll have to be careful with is this, well, the wire for it. There's 3 connecting points in the bottom of this frame that you probably need to pull back, but just be so careful that you don't break those off. If you want to cut that tape and put extra tape back on, that's probably a good option. I am going to try and pull these off because they seem like they are not going to break, but fingers crossed. And then over here on the side is where your ambient air temperature sensor, you just take that right out of there, let it hang. All right, now we've got to lift out the condenser. So on this tab that is on the top of the condenser here, I'm gonna push in with my thumb. If I can find a good spot to push in from, push in with my thumb and lift up on the bottom of the condenser. It'll come right up out. And just wiggle, get the other side up out here. You get it out from those tabs and you're able to swing it out of the way because there's some rubber hoses out here over on the side. All right, so now I've got the AC condenser swung out. I'm supporting it with some other stuff I've got in the garage here. The next step is to get this frame off of here. So there's on the left and right side, the intercooler, which is in the front here, has a couple of feet that are sitting in grommets. So you want to kind of get underneath it and pick it up and try and slide the frame forward out away from the intercooler. You can actually get your thumb up underneath too to press up to get it out of the grommet. There we go. Tilting it forward is definitely helpful to get it out of the way. Now, something I realized that I haven't done yet is remove the intercooler hoses, so probably should have done that step quite a bit earlier, but I'm going to do that now. So now that we're at this point where the hoses are disconnected, the frame is off, there's a clip on the top left and right side that you're going to be able to press, and it will separate the radiator from the intercooler. And then down here, there's a little spot where the radiator actually sits into a spot on the intercooler. So once you get that separated, you'll be able to kind of lift the radiator up from the intercooler or intercooler down from the radiator and get them apart and then take the intercooler off. Wow, this is so much lighter. So still make sure you are supporting your radiator with your garbage can or whatever you choose to support it with. All right, before I compare and weigh the difference between these two, I'm going to gently take off these clips that I'm going to need. Those are going to go on the new intercooler. All right, so we see the OEM intercooler weighs about 7 3/4 pounds. Here's the integrated engineering. Oh my gosh, just lifting it with one arm is a little challenging. 31.1 pounds. Holy cow. Dang, that thing is monstrous. It's big. I'm adding a lot of weight to the front end, 24 pounds. And here's one of the major differences why this thing weighs so much more. There's this weather stripping piece on here. I'm gonna take off the OEM intercooler. And look at the size difference between those two cores. I don't know how that's gonna fit in there. I mean, it's supposed to, but dang. Caliper says for IE, a little over 70 millimeters. And then for the OEM core, we're at 35. So it is basically double the thickness. Holy cow. That's a lot more cooling that we're gonna have. All right, here's one more look at what the integrated engineering unit looks like compared to the OEM with the plastic end tanks. Man, I am so excited to get this in. One thing to note too is that if your grommets on your bottom of your OEM intercooler came out when you pulled it out, make sure that they either go back into the core or the support frame or back onto the intercooler here. We're gonna put on our brackets, make sure that they are the correct orientation where they are facing forward. I think there's only really one way to put them on. Now you're gonna do the reverse where you're gonna pick up your radiator and set it in these side brackets of the intercooler. Once you've got that aligned, you can pull the tops together. All right, so now we're gonna bring in our support frame. Again, make sure you have your grommets in the bottom here. Might need to loosen up my garbage can here. All right, so our next step is to bring the intercooler forward so these tabs come in through the radiator core support. I'm gonna try finding a spot on the back of the radiator to kind of push through, do that side a little bit, and then move over to the other side so it's pushing equally into place. There it goes. All right, next is going to be putting and swinging the condenser back over. What I'm going to do before I do that, just so that I can swing it in place and have something holding it there, is that I'm going to go ahead and kind of pre-install one of these. This is the hardware that they give you. There's kind of a little tab that sits there that is going to hold it in place with a 3mm Allen head, and I'm going to put just a tiny bit of Loctite on this, just because I don't want it to go walking away on me. All right, I'm going to go ahead and snug this one down so I can see about getting the rest of them in. All right, so I've got the hardware on here. There's a little bit of a different design, I think, for some of the condensers that has this angled piece. This one is all the way to the bottom. This one down here is almost all the way to the bottom. And this one up here has a little bit of gap. So I think actually I do have an aftermarket one, because when I bought the car, there was a raccoon accident where a raccoon went in the lower grill. So maybe I have an aftermarket AC condenser that's just a little bit different than what you might be seeing on yours. Anyway, I'm going to tighten this hardware down and we'll move on to the next step. Basically from this point out, it's just putting the puzzle back together. So I'm starting by putting on the intercooler hoses, and then I'm moving on to the crash beam here. I'm putting these 2 bolts in on the top that will actually help support and allow the whole thing to hang. And then I'll put in all the bolts loosely, and then eventually go back to align all the witness marks to make sure everything is alignment. Now, these are the brackets for my all-track skid plate. Do not forget to put these back on if you have this, and actually I would recommend putting the all-track skid plate on first and tightening all that up to make sure it's aligned before you put the bumper cover back on. And you'll see me just putting on the T30s on the side of the radiator core support. I go back and align those as well, and I'm shaking things around to see how tight they are, and finally tightening up those top 2 bolts. And now it's time to attack all the electrical connectors. We have these 2 on the passenger side, the horn on the passenger side so I can honk at people, the driver's side horn so I can honk at even more people, the adaptive cruise control sensor attachment, and right next to it is the ambient air sensor, followed by the driver's side crash sensor. Now grab the air guides. You're going to install the driver's side one where the little slit there has the wires going through it. The one on the passenger side, you'll just clip in just like it came out. I'm going ahead and putting my intake back in, and I'm putting a little bit of Loctite on a couple of these bolts just because I don't want them to back out. Here we go, putting the headlights back in. Just be really careful when you're sliding these back in. All right, so when I'm putting the headlights back in, I'm making sure that this fit right here is looking pretty good. I tightened up this one first to kind of hold it in place because I still have flexibility of moving the headlight. But what I'm doing is making sure I get this back lower. Where are you at? Making sure I get that one in correctly so that it's just the washer on top. I haven't tightened it yet, but then I'm looking at this point right here, and there's a point of contact. There's not a screw that goes in here. The screw is right down in here, but what I'm doing is I'm moving and pushing that piece all the way up against the radiator support. I believe that's how that was previously aligned. So when I'm setting that up, I'm pushing it there and then I'm tightening this one down. Now we've got the radiator core support that is going to go on over the headlights. We've got the long bolt in the back, and we've got the two shorter ones in the front. I believe these are all T30. The paranoia continues where I am forever going to have this zip tied no matter what. The reason I have this zip tied is that I broke the hood latch cable, and these cars are notorious for doing that. And when you break it and the hood is shut, you cannot open the hood. So you are basically locked out of your engine bay. I'm gonna plug in the wire harness. So I'm just making sure that I'm aligning those. Hands. If you're having a problem with things aligning tightly, you can adjust that up and down. Putting the grill back in is the opposite of taking it out. You can see very easily where these tabs go straight down into the bottom front edge here. And so what you're going to do is get them set in place, and then you can just start popping them down where they belong. Working kind of across the grill, and then you'll want to push the grill kind of down and back in so that it tucks under that front edge. Then you're going to put your two T25 screws right back in that spot. All right, so I've got a little ahead of myself. I've got my plate still on here from lining it up, but I'm gonna go ahead and get my hose rerouted. Just pushes right back on and flip down. Then I'm gonna get those clips pushed in the right spot.
All right, so here we are in the final parts. We're going to put this screw back in to reattach the edge of the bumper, put the fender liner screw back in, and then you're going to shove the lower liner back in and get those 4 screws in. Once you get your wheel back on and lowered, you're done and ready to go enjoy your cooler intake air temperatures. If you got a buddy to do this with you, I highly recommend it. It'll be super helpful to have a second hand.